I'm just posting on a phrase, and it's a thing. Empirical evidence, really important point. Um, so when something's empirical, what does this mean, and why am I talking about it? We'll get there. So why is what makes something empirical? Well, in the modern era, if we're talking about a scientific context or social science context, we're talking about something observable, something measurable, and generally there's this sort of backing behind it where there's controls on variables. Basically, we can isolate why two different things are grouped together or talked about in a certain way or connected to some phenomenon. We have a large way to discuss this. So, empirical is something measurable, it's data and all this other thing. What makes something evidentiary? Well, what makes something evidence for theory? What makes it like, there's a philosophy of science or epistemology or something behind it. Well, we can skip a lot of like the fine grained conversations, but you know, one of the things is like, like let's say I own a business. I own a pizza or burrito shop. And so what I do is I go to the grocery store and I hand out like little coupons or brochures or flyers or something for my restaurant. And if I look at like three different data points over three different times I show up, and say on average, there's like I can get 5 people per hour to come to my burrito shop or something. Well, this isn't like evidence of people all over the United States wanting people to hand out flyers and brochures. This is just saying that in my business context, I can invest whatever 5 visits is worth. If it's worth more than an hour, I should be able to make a profit on this. And that's what I went out to test. That's what I wanted to do. 3 sessions, you don't need a sample size, is evidence of this. Now, this came up in like a discussion of Marxist economics and some of these like weirder far left economic theories, which aren't worse than, they're just equally as crazy as sort of the far right neoconservative idea of how risk and transactional value is calculated in the present moment, which is all that exists. Doesn't make sense. But when we talk about like Marxist theory of value or something like that, did Marx present empirical evidence for what he wanted to prove? Well, he provided empirical evidence that there's a strong value preference for social democracy. There's a strong value preference for skepticism about transactional values and what would later be known as these Austrian or neoclassical, neoliberal approaches to economics. Marx proved this, and he proved that it's very difficult in the real world to show why there's not these equal liberating effects of inequality. If someone intuitionally thinks there's just inequality, there's a good reason to believe that, and there's grounding and foundations in this. Now, what Marx didn't do is he didn't destroy neoliberalism, something that didn't exist. He didn't destroy neoclassical economics. He didn't destroy an Austrian school of economics. He didn't do anything, and this is because he didn't provide empirical evidence against those ideas because they didn't exist. And so he didn't provide evidence against Goldman Sachs or something because Goldman Sachs didn't exist. Goldman Sachs's philosophy didn't exist. And if you just say Goldman Sachs and Lobbiests in the same room, or Goldman Sachs and Davos, like a conspiracy theorist would, like a crazy person would want you to believe, when someone asks you to believe something that is patently misleading, intentionally misleading, that's when the ad hominem comes out. If you don't want to have a discussion, you just want to be right, then you are a crazy person. And so, again, looking at things that are evidence, that are empirical, that are measurable, Marx had all these things, but he did not have these things about a scientific theory. And most people, I don't think there is a single academic today that would say Marxist theory of value exchange is valid, is capable of building a model. I think in most cases, you can probably find many small cases where an economic terms, you could say inefficiency. If you want to use Marxist terms, you could say where there's corruption, or where there's severe imbalances, where there's not these equilibrating effects in the present moment on economies. And you could find this value theory in Marxist thought. But it is not some like global sweeping view with a necessary ideological conclusion. So that's the 5 minute and 30-second video.